And I'll just add people as they come. But you can start.
We can, what?
You can start.
Oh, okay. I guess we're live then.
Huh?
No.
That works.
Are you doing an intro or no?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Q&A with Dr. Dino. Again, I'm Lindsay. I'm one of Dr. Dino's daughters. And basically how this works is we have a few pre-written questions that people submitted before the call that I'll be asking Dr. Dino. But if you did want to ask him any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. And we'll try and make sure he gets them. If he doesn't get to them this one, we'll ask him in the next session. Each of these, we're hoping to cover a little bit of a different topic. And if any of your friends missed this call, we will be uploading the video to YouTube right after, so they can watch it that way.
Okay. Hey, guys. We're going to be talking a little bit about fossils in general, but starting off obviously with my favorite, the dinos, and talking a little bit about some of the ideas of working on different fossils and collecting material. One of the things in the lab, we've had a lot of time to start going through a lot of material that we brought back from the field, predominantly from one of our sites in Montana, where we're working with the Two Medicine Dinosaur site. Over the last probably about 8 years, we've ran quite a bit of expeditions out there where a lot of people have gotten a chance to work with them and also work with some of the surface collecting we do in some of the areas, microsites especially. And a lot of the material we bring back, when you're in the field, you're collecting and you're excited, you've got only so much time in the field, and you don't get to it right away. In fact, the piece I'm about to open up is one I collected a little over 10 years ago, and I honestly have no clue what it was. It's sometimes when you're, especially in a site like a microsite where you've got material that's been washed down, eroded out of the hills, the context is a little bit gone. So you collect it with the idea that you'll work on it back when you have time to sit still and really concentrate. But the best thing about it, a lot of the stuff you bring back, it's not even the piece you were intended to collect. The matrix around it sometimes has really incredible things in it. Yesterday in the lab, we were pulling some matrix off a small toe bone of a duckbill dino, and in the matrix was a pair of theropod, meat-eating dinosaur teeth that we didn't know that. We were bringing it back for that bone, but these were shed teeth, potentially from a scavenger that may have been eating on that animal while it was rotting away. This one, it was wrapped up in tinfoil. One of the ways in the field, if you've got a small item and you're trying to get it back, we often put tinfoil around it, and that kind of holds it together. It's not going to do well because it's probably already got some cracks in it, so you want to be able to take your time. I've made the mistake, like many other fossil people in the field, of trying to work on a fossil in the field. Really bad idea. It's really easy to glue a lot of dirt into the fossil. It's really easy to lose pieces or just not be able to get it finished. And so the idea is you wrap it up, bring it back. Usually don't forget about it for 10 years, but this one was. Whenever I'm working with one, there's a lot of matrix on it that I tend to try to screen out because that matrix, again, could have some really cool clues to what was out there. This particular piece in the tinfoil, it's actually a vertebrae, a piece of a vertebrae from a duckbill dinosaur, probably from Brachiolephosaurus. That's the most common one we're finding in the Judith River Formation. Neat thing about it is, one of the reasons I even collected this piece is it looks to be arthritic, which means there's a lot of extra bone. The surface is not typical for a lot of the vertebrae. And so I'm hoping it's from a really older animal, and that arthritis tells a whole new story too. Now, the problem with this particular piece, it's going to be a very slow one because there's a lot of microfractures all throughout the bone. I'm going to be using some of the glues as I harden it up and try to hold it together, but I'm really interested to see what's in some of the matrix. The sandstone matrix tends to have some really cool fossils. Microfossils for me are pretty unique because it does tell the rest of the story. We all know about dinos, but it's kind of neat to know that the amphibians, the mammals, the reptiles that were with them in the same site. And some of the most interesting finds of those microfossils are often done by amateurs working with some of the field paleontologists. Having the time to pull through things. I've had kids working with some of the matrix, and because being old, my eyesight's terrible, but with kids tend to have better visual acuity, and it's kind of neat to see them work through some matrix and find something that I know I would have overlooked unless I'm using one of my magnifiers. But it is kind of a neat one, and it's one that can be done by a group of people working together, and a lot of times volunteers. So with this Brachiosaurus vertebrae, which I hope it is, we'll take it, we'll harden up the pieces, we'll work through the matrix, we'll try to also see if there's any more of this. In the locality that this was found, it was all eroded out of the side of a cliff out in Montana, and there was a lot of pieces jumbled up. And so as we collect it, we harden it, get the piece ready. But one of the other people in the lab may be working on another tinfoil piece that has a piece of a vertebrae, and it's kind of neat when you get things finished and then all of a sudden you realize they go back together. And there's been times that I've actually fixed a vertebrae and years later found another vertebrae in one of the trays labeled with the same locality, fix that end, and then no, it won't ever fit together, and then it slides right together. It does happen, and it's kind of a neat one to find your complete material, or it's a piece that we don't think is much to it. We clean off the matrix and something really unique shows up. We did that a few years ago with a baby humerus from a baby duckbill dino. Didn't have any ends. It was just a chunk of bone that we collected more as a practice. So somebody in the lab could practice on the prepping the matrix. And as the matrix was taken off, very clear bite marks with tooth drags, which are where the serrated tooth was dragged sideways, to the point that we could determine who ate that animal 78 million years ago by just those lines, measuring those lines on the dino. We couldn't tell if he killed it. We could tell if he was scavenging it. So this is one of those pieces where we'll take our time, we'll sift it through our sifter. In that, we'll wash, screen wash, look for small fossils. And so it becomes a group effort. Some of that screen washing will be done by volunteers. Some of the hardening may be done by people in the lab. If it needs to be put back together, I'll turn and end up handing it over to Ashley, one of our articulators. She'll have to put it back together again. Anything we break, we tend to let her put back together again. Gives her something to do to keep her busy. But we start off working with a lot of dinos. But a question that Lindsay and I were talking about the other day, somebody had asked us, are all fossils dinos? And obviously, those of us who are dino fanatics, we know that answer. But it's a good one to remind people, fossils, there are fossils of plants and fossils of mammals, everything. Life can be fossilized. The dinos are ones we focus on a lot, but here in Florida, we don't. As we talked about before, there are no dino fossils predominantly in Florida because A, we're under deep water during the time period, and then any exposures that might be there up to the very top of the panhandle probably would be under an incredible amount of overburden because of millions of years of the Appalachian Mountains putting sediment on top of any of that fossil layer. They do find some material up in Alabama and Georgia, but usually in very deep gorges or areas where there's been an exposure or even deep drilling. But in Florida, we don't have dinos, but we have really cool stuff. And one of them we want to talk about real quickly was this little guy, so I can move him into the screen a bit better. This is the skull of a glyptodont. Glyptodonts were giant, armored, basically armadillos almost, but they were up to 6 feet tall on the top of their shell. They were found all over, they're found all over North and South America, but in Florida, we find a lot of them. And generally, unfortunately, it's hard to see if we generally only find little pieces, little parts of that shell. It's almost like a turtle shell, but each individual piece locks together. We are in the process in the lab right now trying to rebuild one. I believe we have 1,200 of those little pieces, and they were not collected together. There was in a pile in a, we believe, a gully in a river. And when it was collected years ago, they assumed that it was associated. But we're beginning to put it together again. The neat thing about it, in that pile, there was one jaw from the glyptodont with some of the teeth in it, which is another really a unique find. Generally, you get those scoots, you get some postcranial, non-skull bone, but very rarely do you find the actual skull elements. But when you do, they're weird looking. It's a very unique looking skull. And it's one that a lot of people know because you see toys of it, you see it's in a lot of pictures, but it's not a dinosaur. This animal existed 50 million years after the dinosaurs. It's hard sometimes to even grasp that, even for people I've known that have worked all their life in paleontology, just the amount of time between dinosaurs and us, but even the amount of time the dinosaurs, the reality that Tyrannosaurus Rex walked on fossils from the Allosaurus, one of my favorite dinos, but those fossils were 100 million years old when T-Rex was walking on those Allosaurus bones, if it was in the same area. Just the idea, and then you jump into our mammals. Here's an animal that we know is fossil, lived millions of years ago, to probably about 10 to 20,000 years. I believe these are one of the ones that went extinct much later than some of the other things. One of the other animals that was contemporary with the Glyptodont is giant tortoises. And here in Florida, we find a lot of fossil turtle, but tortoises. Some of those tortoises, they believe, would have been 6 feet tall also. Neat thing about it, they have found some pieces of giant tortoise with pretty clear evidence of stone tool butchering, that somebody, some human, paleo-human, actually ate that animal or scavenged that animal, which would make sense. I don't believe we have any good evidence of that with Glyptodons yet, but they do have some really good specimens. There's been some found in Central and South America recently where the shells were still intact. Here in Florida, they have found associated pieces, but never ones that are perfectly intact. That's a tough one. Their shells, those little plates, it's hard to see, but there's tiny little sutures and they fall apart very, very easy. And even after you put one together, if you're not solidifying the piece well enough, it falls right back apart again. Like we had talked about before, we use a lot of the PaleoBond glues, and the PaleoBond glues are fantastic. You're putting 1 drop of glue, you're spraying the hardener, and boom, it's solid as a rock. Quick, easy way of doing it. Does provide some problems. Most of the people in the Dino lab have learned the hard way that if you're touching something, when you spray and you've got a little bit of glue on it, you're stuck to that something for a while. In fact, one of the incidents I did many years ago was I was working in the garage on a fossil project, was very excited about it, put some of the glue on it, held it down, sprayed it, and then realized I had just glued my hand to the table. And this glue does not come off at all unless you use something to remove it. So here I'm stuck to a table and I look over and there's a debonder that comes with it, takes the glue off nice and easy. Small problem was you have to have it within reach if you're glued to something. And I was glued to a table and it was out of my reach. And for the next hour and a half, I tried everything I could think of to extend my reach to the little bottle of debonder. Didn't work until my older daughter walked into the garage, realized how frustrated I was because I was glued to the table, picked it up and said, "Dad, what's my allowance now?" It is something that we now, remind people, put that in your pocket when you're working with the PaleoBonds, because you really do need to get it off. Great thing about having this is we glue those little plates together and we realize, oh man, this is not the right fit. The debonder will remove the glue and allow us to redo it. Takes a little bit of time, but it does work really well. And it's a very quick and easy way to assemble our fossils. It even provides us with a glue, which is a stabilizer. This one is basically the same glue, super thin. And that will be put into a crack in that bone and run down inside of it and solidify the internal part of the bone there. Makes a little bit of difference. And like I said, if you were to speak to any of our lab volunteers or anyone that's worked around our Dino lab, or anyone that's probably ever used PaleoBond, they will have their stories of gluing their fingers together, going to bite the lid off and gluing your lips together. Never a good idea. But it is one, generally you do it once or twice, or 10 times in my case, but then you start remembering to always carry the debonder with you. We even carry it now in the field, because sometimes, every once in a while, when you're working in the field, you do have that bone that you can see that if you just held it together to get it back, it would do a lot better when you're doing the prep work on it.
Thanks. So we have some questions from people that are watching. One person asked, where can someone go fossil hunting if they wanted to?
The neat thing about that is I remind people all the time that wherever you are, check around to see if there's a fossil club. In Orlando, Florida, the Orlando Fossil Hunters, Tampa Bay Fossil Hunters, South Florida has one, Dallas Paleontological Society. A lot of the cities and big towns will often have other people who are really enthusiastic about fossils and natural history, and they've gotten together and got a group, and it's a great way to begin because you're getting to meet people who already know where some of the local sites are, know the rules, and even some of the techniques. A lot of the really cool techniques we've learned over the years are from people who've been experimenting for years and years. And a lot of those clubs also are really good about helping people understand the rules and some of the ethics behind it. Working with paleontologists, not against them. Working with field stations that need volunteers, need help. But also providing the opportunity for places to take people fossil hunting. The Orlando Fossil Club a couple weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago, had run a trip up to the Vulcan mine, and some families that had asked me about it had signed up, went, and they had a great time collecting fossil echinoids up there and learning how to do it because these club members want to share it with them. And then you begin to pick up some of those techniques. But the other way is in most states in the country, there's a book called Roadside Geology of Florida or Georgia or Texas. It's a great book that gives you good localities to collect fossil material right in your own backyard a lot of times.
And Katie wants to know, do you have any advice for novice fossil hunters to keep from getting discouraged?
Well, and it is a tough one. There have been times I've taken people for their first time on a fossil hunt, and like anything else, it sometimes takes a lot of patience. That getting out there and not finding something right away, you get that thought, oh, there's nothing here. Now, that one is a tough one because it is easy. You got to, and you have to keep doing it. Now, the neat thing is, on the other hand, if you do have success and you find something, so it's again going with somebody who's a little more experienced, then people either really fall in love with the act of fossil hunting, or they realize maybe that's not for them. For me, it was kind of a neat one. A few years ago, I took a group of teen volunteers from the Brevard Zoo where I was working and into the Peace River. Hadn't been there in years. We rode a big bus down there, and all the way down, a lot of the teenagers were, and with my bias, but were complaining, oh, we're going out fossil hunting. Why do we have to do this? It's, it's going to be boring, blah. Get out into the river. And it was an area of the Peace River that has a lot of small fossil material, shark teeth, things like that. And within about 20 minutes, pretty much every single teen that was in the water had already found a few shark teeth, found a chunk of bone. I literally could have left at that point because they were gung-ho. They were finding things on their own. And here, this same group of teens who were complaining about having to go do this, we couldn't get them out of the water. They didn't want to leave. They were fine after hours and hours of in the hot sun. They were finding really neat fossil material, and it got them excited. The good thing for me, that was 2 years ago. Quite a few of those teen volunteers go with their family on a pretty regular basis to either the Peace River or Venice because of it is an exciting experience to find something. One of the young men from that was on that trip is actually applying for the University of Florida to go to he's going to go into geology, but his goal is to get a graduate degree in paleontology. It's kind of neat to see that because it is an exciting thing. That fossil hunting in general is exciting, and then when you have some success and find some neat material out there. And there is the question I get a lot from families is, isn't everything already been found? And the answer, of course, is no. And there is every year of erosion, new material is being exposed, and there is just some truly amazing things out there still to be found.
And our last question is kind of a two-part question from Brent is, how many fossil hunts have you been on in your lifetime? And do you always find fossils when you go on a hunt?
That would take a long time. I've been on over 200 or 300 trips on fossil hunting. A lot of them were early on. We're here in Florida, Peace River, fossil, a lot of megalodon diving trips I've done over the years. And even working, there used to be a site near Tampa that on the weekends, the University of Florida had collected so much Pleistocene material, they literally wanted nothing else from that site. So the local fossil club was allowed to let groups in there once a week, and we would go week after week and finding Pleistocene forests and taper material and giant ground sloth. Really a pretty exciting place. One that at the time we didn't really appreciate how amazing it was. Now that it's filled with water and you can't go in there anymore, I would love to go back for another trip there. But I've done quite a few of them. And every once in a while you do go on fossil trips that you don't find things. That's sort of, it would almost be not as exciting if every single trip you found something amazing. Some trips you don't. Some trips it's just you're getting a chance to be out in nature, hiking through the valleys in Montana, even not finding any. Of course, you want to go find something, but just being out there, it's amazing, being outdoors. And sometimes you're not the one who finds it. You're the group you're working with and somebody else gets to find. That's really exciting to be part of also, to see that. And a lot of times, some of our fossil hunting now, like I said, is the micro material. Just yesterday, I ordered 2 big boxes full of matrix from a microsite, from the Hell Creek Formation, the last of the dinosaur periods formations, where we're going to spend time sitting at a table, going through that for small stuff. That's a fossil hunt. It's not out in the field, but it still is a pretty exciting thing because you have no idea what you're going to find. So I've been on lots of trips. I've been on a few which we say we've been skunked, where we've spent days out in the field looking for material. We once had a group doing a fossil prospecting on a 1.6 million acre ranch out in Colorado for the owners of the ranch, and we were trying to find fossil sites that they could bring guests to on the ranch. And it was, I think, a team of probably 7 or 8 of us. We were out there probably 6 days and basically didn't really find anything. We had a great time, rolled a lot of rocks down the hills, had a chance to spend time talking about learning the geology of that area, and realized the areas that we were searching really didn't have a lot. We did locate a plant site with some nice plant fossils, but really was not the right material to be looking for. But it's part of the experience is looking, being out there and trying to find it. On the other hand, I was on a trip once where we only had a few hours out in the field. And in those few hours, the 3 of us on the group probably found more material in those 2 hours than we had found in the last 2 years. It was just a super abundant, rich site that we had gone into, and we had no idea it was there. It was a relatively new area for us.
Okay, so to close off this video, give us your best dinosaur joke.
Our best dinosaur, I can give you the worst dinosaur joke. One of the ones that I often end it's a pair of them. I end a lot of our Dr. Dino tours when we're working the animatronics is, where do Triceratops sit? It's on their Triceratops. And the other one, which is just as bad, if not worse, is, why can't we allow dinosaurs to drive cars? Well, Tyrannosaurus Rex. They get worse too, trust me. Thanks, guys. Please send in your questions again. Also, if you have any kids that are stuck at home that needs, something they want to learn and have some fun, send us your email with an address. We'll send out some dig kits and some fossil matrix, and give you guys a chance to have some opportunity to dig through. So we have a lot of pretty neat matrix that it's slow, but it's fun. And it's really neat to see that a kid or an adult, when they find that first little fossil in that micro matrix, that excitement of finding it. Have a great day, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.